Okay, for this mock exercise, we're going to take a look at a case called Castle's Equipment Repair. And we're going to analyze the errors and the effect of those errors on the trial balance. Let's take a look at the question. Oops. So the bookkeeper made the following errors in journalizing and posting. So what we have, we're given the actual, an example of the first one. So it says for each of the errors, so let's read the first error. A credit posting of $400 to accounts receivable was omitted. That means that the credit posting, that means that if you think about what the error is or what was missed, they missed crediting the accounts receivable. But the debit, it doesn't say that the actual debit side of the entry was omitted. It's only the credit side of the entry is omitted. So they forgot to credit accounts receivable essentially for $400. So in each of the errors indicate A is the trial balance. Will it balance? And the answer is, in this case, no, because we only have a one-sided entry. And it says in B, the amount of the difference of the trial balance that will not balance. In this case, it's going to be off by $400. And which side of the trial balance, okay, which side of the trial balance is larger? Is the larger the debit or the credit? In this case, because we forgot to credit the accounts receivable account, and accounts receivable is a debit balance, then the larger side of the trial balance is going to be the debit side. Okay? So that's the first error. And they've given us the answer for that. Let's look at the second error. A debit posting of $750 for prepaid insurance was debited to insurance expense. So what they did was they debited prepaid insurance. Instead of debiting prepaid insurance as an asset, they debited insurance expense instead. Okay, so they must have debited insurance expense, credit, let's say cash. They should have debited prepaid insurance, credit, cash. Okay? So the second one is the trial balance. The answer is yes, because they have a debit and credit. So they have an entry that affected two accounts, and the amounts are the same, are recorded. So the balance is going to continue to balance, the trial balance. What is the amount of the difference? Well, because the balance, the amount is, the difference is 0. And which side of the trial balance, the larger columns, it's going to be no effect, right? Because the trial balance. So what's the correcting entry? So I'm expanding the question a little bit. And in this case, the correcting entry for number 2 would be debit. So this is I'm going to put down correcting entry. In this case, the correcting entry will be debit prepaid insurance. And we're going to credit insurance expense. That's the correcting entry. And the correcting entry for the first one is we're going to just credit accounts receivable $400. So we need to record the other half of that missing entry. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, let's look at error number 3. A collection on account of $100 was journalized and posted as $100 debit and $100 credit to revenue. So what's going on here? They collected $100 worth of cash. And it says collection on account. And that should give you a hint that that was a collection from a receivable, from an accounts receivable. So the debit is correct, but the credit to service revenue is wrong. It should be to accounts receivable, short form AR. So is the trial balance going to be imbalanced? The answer is yes, because there is a debit and credit entry. Now, the credit is wrong, but certainly they credited an account, so it does balance. And the difference is 0, and there is no larger account on the trial balance. But here's the correcting entry. The correcting entry is going to be debit revenue, because it doesn't belong to revenue. You're going to credit accounts receivable, because the accounts receivable is overstated. So let's recap the issue in number 3. Number 3 says they received money, collection on account. And collection on account means that they were able to get cash from one of their payments, from their accounts receivable payment. But instead, it was journalized as a debit to $100 cash, which is correct, but the credit is to receivable, but instead they recorded as service revenue, and that's what the correcting entry is. We're going to reduce the revenue, and we're going to credit accounts receivable. Let's look at number 4. A credit posting of $500 to accounts payable was made twice. So what did they do? They debit some sort of expense, and they credited accounts payable for $500 twice. So is that going to create an imbalance? The answer is it's going to create an imbalance, right? It's not going to balance because there's too much credit, okay, of $500. So which side of the account is larger? It's going to be the credit side. So the trial balance, the credit side is going to be larger, higher. Okay? Now, how do we correct it? The correction is going to be a debit to accounts payable by $500. It's a one-sided entry because they credited the accounts payable twice. That's why the credit has the larger column on the trial balance. Okay? Number 5, a cash purchase of supplies for $250 was journalized and posted as a $250 debit to supplies and a $25 credit to cash. A cash purchase of supplies, so they should have credited cash, $250, and debit supplies $250. Instead, it was journalized as a $250 debit to supplies and a credit to cash of $25. So that entry doesn't even balance. Okay, the debit is right, so this is good, okay, but this one should be credit $250 cash. The account is right, but the amount is wrong. Is this going to create a balance? The answer is no. It's going to be an imbalance. The difference will be the difference between $250 and $25 is $225. And which credit, which balance, which column is larger? In this case, the column that's larger is going to be the debit side of the column, right? Because the credit is 25. It should have been 250. So which side is larger? It's going to be the debit side, okay? So what's the correcting entry? The correcting entry is going to be a one-sided entry. it's going to credit cash for $225. They only credited $25. They should have credited $250. That's why I need to credit cash an extra $225. Okay? And finally, number 6, a debit of $465 to advertisement was posted as $456. This is what we call a transposition error. So therefore, the balance, it's not going to balance, and the difference is going to be the difference between $465 minus $456, which is $9. And which side of the column is larger? So they debited $465 advertising. Instead of debiting $465, they debited $456. So the credit side is going to be the larger column. Okay? And how did we correct it? Well, they should have debited $465, so we're going to debit advertising expense. $9 by debiting it means that the debits and credits will now equal. The fact that this debit is missing, the reason why the credit column is larger. Okay? Thank you.